If you've been trying to lose weight and nothing seems to be moving, your liver is worth a closer look. When the liver is overloaded, it struggles to process fat efficiently, and that can make weight loss feel a lot harder than it should be. The good news is, there are simple, well-supported habits that can help take some of that pressure off. Today we're going through 7 of them, what the research actually says about each one, and how to use them in a realistic way. Let's start with the first thing you do each morning, because it sets the tone for how your liver handles the rest of the day. Overnight, while you're not eating or drinking, digestive processes slow down, including the flow of bile, the fluid your liver produces to help break down fat and carry waste out of the body. By morning, that bile can be more concentrated and sluggish than it is during the day. This is where lemon water comes in. Drinking water with fresh lemon juice first thing in the morning is a simple, low-risk habit with a couple of genuine benefits. The acidity and flavor compounds in lemon can stimulate digestive secretions, including bile release, which may help things move along more easily after a night of relative inactivity. Lemons are also a solid source of vitamin C and other antioxidant compounds which support the body's general defense against oxidative stress, a process the liver deals with constantly as part of its detox workload. To be clear about what this does and doesn't do, lemon water is not a dramatic liver cleanse, and it won't undo the effect of a poor diet on its own. But as a gentle, low-effort habit to support digestion and hydration first thing in the morning, it's reasonable and well-tolerated for most people. If you want to try it, here's a simple approach. Squeeze half a fresh lemon into 8 to 12 ounces of warm or room temperature water. Warm water tends to be gentler on the stomach than cold water first thing in the morning, and very hot water isn't necessary, since heat isn't required for the benefits here. Drink it before your coffee or breakfast, so it's the first thing your system processes. Using a straw and rinsing your mouth afterward is a reasonable habit if you're concerned about the citric acid affecting tooth enamel over time. If the taste is too strong, diluting it further is completely fine. You don't lose meaningful benefit by doing so. You can also sip lemon water throughout the day or before meals if you find it helps with digestion. Number 2 is something most people already have in their kitchen: coffee. There's real, fairly well-established research here, so let's go through it carefully. Coffee is one of the richest common dietary sources of polyphenols, including a compound called chlorogenic acid, which has antioxidant properties. Several large observational studies have found that regular coffee drinkers tend to have lower rates of liver fibrosis and reduced risk of chronic liver disease, including conditions like cirrhosis and liver cancer, compared to non-drinkers. Some studies have reported reductions in mortality risk from chronic liver disease among regular coffee drinkers, with figures in various studies ranging from meaningfully lower to substantially lower risk, depending on the population studied and how regular consumption is defined. It's worth being precise about causation here. These are observational studies, which means they show a strong and consistent association, not proof that coffee alone directly prevents liver disease in every individual. Still, this is one of the more replicated positive findings in liver research, and it's one reason many hepatologists don't recommend cutting out coffee for liver health, and in some cases actively encourage it. If you want to lean into this habit, a few practical notes. Keep your coffee relatively clean, black or with modest additions, since heavy syrups, artificial sweeteners and processed creamers add sugar and processing without adding any liver benefit. Choosing organic coffee can reduce pesticide exposure, since coffee crops are among the more heavily treated ones, though this is a matter of general exposure reduction rather than a liver-specific requirement. Most of the research showing benefit is centered around roughly 2 to 4 cups a day for most adults, though tolerance varies a lot, person to person, and if you're sensitive to caffeine, decaf still retains a meaningful share of the antioxidant compounds. Number 3 is a category of food with genuinely strong research behind it: cruciferous vegetables, meaning broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, kale, and cauliflower. These vegetables contain a compound called sulforaphane, which activates a cellular pathway known as NRF2. This pathway increases the body's production of glutathione, one of the most important antioxidants the liver uses to neutralize toxins and prepare them for elimination through bile and urine. There is real research here worth mentioning carefully. A notable study conducted in a heavily polluted region of China gave participants a beverage made from broccoli sprout extract and found increased elimination of certain airborne pollutants, measured through urine samples, within a short period. This is a real and interesting finding, though it's specific to that study's design and population, and it's reasonable to view it as promising evidence, rather than a guarantee of identical results for everyone eating broccoli at home. What is well supported more broadly is that cruciferous vegetables support the body's antioxidant defenses in a way that can last for a couple of days after eating them, which is part of why consistent regular intake matters more than a single large serving occasionally. A reasonable target is around 1 to 2 cups of cooked cruciferous vegetables most days. One useful prep tip: chopping these vegetables and letting them rest for a short period before cooking allows more of the sulforaphane-forming enzyme reaction to occur, which is a real, evidence-based detail from food chemistry research, since heat can otherwise deactivate the enzyme involved. Number 4 is dandelion root, which has a long history of traditional use for digestion and liver support, particularly in early spring after long winters of heavier eating. There's something worth appreciating here even before we get to the science. People used to forage the first dandelion shoots of spring, specifically because their bodies felt better after eating them, long before anyone understood the concept of bile flow or antioxidant pathways. That kind of traditional pattern recognition is often an early clue that something in a food is doing real work, even if the detailed mechanism takes centuries to catch up. The evidence here is more limited than the previous items, so it's worth being honest about that. Dandelion root contains bitter compounds that may stimulate bile production and digestive secretions, a category of plant compounds broadly referred to as bitters. Some smaller studies and traditional use support a mild choleretic effect, meaning it may encourage bile flow, but large, high-quality human trials specifically on dandelion root and liver function are still limited. Some of the more detailed mechanistic work has been done in animal models rather than large human trials, so the human evidence should be treated as preliminary rather than conclusive. This doesn't mean it's not worth trying, it just means the evidence is more preliminary compared to something like coffee or cruciferous vegetables. If you want to use it, dandelion root tea is a common and low-risk way to do so, generally steeped for around 10 minutes in hot water, using 1 to 2 teaspoons of the dried root. It's worth checking with a doctor before use, if you take medications that affect bile flow or blood sugar, since dandelion can interact with some of these, and it's also worth avoiding if you're allergic to related plants like ragweed, since cross-reactivity is possible. Number 5 is black radish, or its more common and equally useful relative, red radish. These contain glucosinolates, similar in category to the compounds in cruciferous vegetables, which break down into isothiocyanates, compounds studied for their role in supporting the liver's detoxification enzymes. Traditional use of black radish for digestive and liver support has a long history in parts of Europe, and there is some supporting research on isothiocyanates and liver enzyme activity, though much of the more detailed mechanistic research has been done in animal or cell studies rather than large human trials. Practically, radishes are a low-risk, nutrient-dense vegetable regardless of how strong the specific liver claims turn out to be, since they're low in calories and contain fiber and vitamin C. Eating them raw in salads, roasted as a side dish, or grated into other meals are all reasonable ways to include them regularly. Number 6 is artichoke, which has some of the more specific human research behind it. Artichoke leaf extract contains a compound called cynarin, along with other polyphenols, and several clinical studies have looked at artichoke leaf extract for liver enzyme support and mild digestive symptoms, with generally positive but modest results. Some research has also looked at artichoke extract in relation to cholesterol levels, with mixed but somewhat favorable findings in certain studies. It's worth noting that most of the stronger research uses concentrated leaf extract rather than eating the artichoke heart as a vegetable, so if you're specifically trying to replicate study conditions, an extract or supplement form is closer to what's been tested, while eating artichoke as a food is a reasonable and healthy addition regardless, just with a less direct line to the specific research. Number 7 is garlic, which has one of the longer track records of use for metabolic health, including some evidence around insulin sensitivity. Garlic contains a compound called allicin, formed when garlic is crushed or chopped, which has been studied for effects on blood lipids, blood pressure, and in some studies, markers of insulin sensitivity and liver fat. Several meta-analyses have found modest reductions in liver enzymes and liver fat markers in some populations using garlic supplementation, alongside other cardiometabolic benefits, like modest reductions in blood pressure and cholesterol in some studies. As with the other items further down this list, it's fair to describe this evidence as promising but not definitive. Garlic is a well-studied food overall, but specific effects on liver fat reduction are one part of a broader body of research rather than a single settled conclusion. If you want to maximize the allicin content, chopping or crushing garlic and letting it sit for about 10 minutes before cooking allows more of the compound to form, since it requires an enzymatic reaction triggered by cutting the cloves. Bringing this together, of the 7 habits covered here, the ones with the strongest and most consistent research behind them are coffee and cruciferous vegetables, both of which have a solid base of human studies. Lemon water is a reasonable, low-risk morning habit, even though its effects are more modest than sometimes claimed. Dandelion root, black radish, and artichoke have real traditional use and some supporting research, though the human evidence is generally less extensive than for coffee or cruciferous vegetables. Garlic sits in between, with a meaningful body of research on metabolic health broadly and some more specific findings on liver fat. None of these foods work in isolation from the rest of your diet. If the overall pattern of what you eat is high in added sugar, refined carbohydrates, and heavily processed food, these habits can help at the margins, but they won't offset a diet that's working against your liver the rest of the day. The most reliable approach is building a foundation of whole foods, adequate fiber, and moderate alcohol intake, and then layering in habits like these as additional support, rather than as a substitute for the basics. One more thing worth mentioning before we wrap up. A lot of content online frames these foods as urgent fixes for a liver that's supposedly backed up or toxic, using fairly dramatic language. In reality, a healthy liver in someone without diagnosed liver disease is already doing its job continuously and doesn't need dramatic intervention to function. These habits are better understood as supportive additions for general metabolic health, not as treatments for a medical condition. If you have symptoms that concern you, persistent fatigue, digestive changes, unexplained weight changes, or you already know you have elevated liver enzymes or a diagnosed liver condition, the right move is talking to a doctor, who can run actual blood work and imaging rather than guessing from symptoms alone. Diet and lifestyle changes are genuinely useful, but they work best alongside proper medical guidance, not as a replacement for it. It's also worth saying plainly that none of the 7 items here are magic, and none of them will meaningfully move the needle if the rest of your diet is working against you. If you're consuming a lot of added sugar, refined carbohydrates, fried food, or alcohol on a regular basis, that pattern will outweigh the benefit of a cup of coffee or a serving of broccoli. Think of these 7 habits as the supporting cast, not the main event. The main event is still the basics: enough sleep, regular movement, a diet built mostly around whole foods, adequate fiber, and limited alcohol. Once that foundation is in place, these 7 additions can genuinely help at the margins, and the research behind several of them, especially coffee and cruciferous vegetables, is solid enough that they're worth including as a regular part of your routine, rather than a passing trend. If you found this helpful, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.